Thank you. We will begin. We are at 8.01, Board Policy Adoption Revision. So at this time, will you please?
Okay, Board, in your package you have several policies up for review. We recognize that this month we have a combined session, so you haven't had the opportunity during a study session to have conversations. So just as a quick reminder, if there are any policies that the board is not ready to approve tonight, that can be pulled out and revisited in February. Also, as a reminder, policies come to you. We have Missouri School Board Association is our policy provider, and revisions come to you typically for one of three reasons. Either change in federal or state guidelines that we have to amend our policy to align with. MSBA also conducts regular policy review to just update and better word language within the policies. And then finally, an update can come to you for district requests. So something we've changed, typically that's related to things like benefits and things like that. So, with that said, I'm not going to go through each one. The majority of these policies are related to new federal or state guidelines or legislation that was passed last session. So, with that said, I'll open it up for questions.
I think it's important that for all of us to know these are being brought forward to us, and you just mentioned not our question, not at our
request. There were a couple that said that on by district request.
Yes, those are a couple policies around leave and our definition of excessive absences that we redefined this past year and the early separation set.
I have questions about several of them. How do you guys feel about going one policy at a time, and if nobody has any questions, go to the next one, and we just hit them one at a time? Would that, instead of every person asking them questions, if we could...
How many do we have? How many policies do we have?
I think it's around 15.
Share which ones you, and we'll just go to the ones you have a concern around. Do you mind?
If nobody has a concern about the voting method, I'd like to go to the second one.
Okay.
But I don't want to skip that one. Does anyone have any questions about the voting method? I'm not trying to keep over.
You mean the first
one? It's called BDDF.
Those that you have concerns with, let's just bring forward. Okay, so Marion has a question about, what is your question?
BDDL. There are more clarifications than questions. Does that make sense? Some of them are outright questions. So on BDDL,
Release of information.
Release of information. So I read things twice. The first time it's, the second time it's critically, like, what am I missing? So the way I read it the first time was I was interpreting this as giving the district more flexibility in releasing information, which is always good. But there's two concerns I have. One, I want to make sure that as you read it, John and Bernita, as you read it, I want to be sure that this in no way limits or decreases the authority of the board.
I don't see how it will.
It does not.
Okay.
Particular paragraph?
Well, the part that I'm a little kind of confused about is it got rid of everything and replaced it with, it boiled it down to one sentence, which is, we're just going to respond to the request for district records as required by the law, because the law was previously stated. So because I'm not aware of any changes in the law, we're just taking the law out of it and saying we're just going to follow the law. The problem is then if we're going to follow the law, what's wrong with what we have right now? The law is stated in here. We're going to do this. So I'm trying to understand what the motivation to change it is, because the only potential problem I see is down the line we look at it and say, well, what's the law? I don't know what it is. It's not written out anymore, and then it could be perceived as not being transparent. And if everything is done correctly, I'm all about flexibility. But I feel like we're removing one layer of the watchdog, and I don't want to be in that position where it's like, well, you guys just changed everything. You don't want to do it,
this is one of those situations where it is just MSBA revising language to make it more efficient, and that's why it came forward.
Is there a change in law?
There is not a change in law. So it simply is what you stated, which is MSBA saying there's no need to lay out the law in here. The advantage, so to speak, of just saying we will follow the law is if the law is amended, we don't then have to amend the policy. Okay? But if you specify the steps that are specific to the way the law is currently, if the law changes, then it requires amendment of the policy. That would be the pros and
If
cons.
the law changes, you don't have to amend it because you've already said you were going to
Follow the law.
Follow the law, right? So that's the efficiency lens that I know MSBA is looking through. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter to us one way or the other. If the board wants to keep the stuff listed out, I mean, that's the stuff we're legally required to do anyhow, so.
I say wait till we have to change, the law changes. It's a nice reference to know what the law is. That's my only question. Thank you.
I would like to, right on top of that, I think it's, let's see here. Section 2, 8. Paragraph 8. Copies may be furnished free or at a reduced rate if the board determines that it is in the public interest because it is likely to contribute to public understanding of the operations or activities of the district and is not primarily based on commercial interest. I don't want to see that authority taken away from the board. I want to be able to keep that. So I would be one to keep that within this policy.
I guess that's what I was asking. By striking that, are we giving that up?
I think so.
Yeah, and I would say that all of that is part.
Is that all part of the law still?
Yeah, all those bullet points, yeah.
It's already there. For example, when Tammy, our custodian records, receives a request, there's a process based on what the Sunshine Law requires her to do. She follows that process. So in essence, you're not giving it up because we're going to follow the law and to make sure that we do that. Based on the fees to copy or whatever, there are many times that there's not a fee, or if it's just something we've had to email or we'll post, or we'll say, the information is already posted on our district website, here's the link. So that's already occurring. What have I missed?
Yeah, no, that's really it.
So we still have the authority as a board to be able to say, hey, look, I want to release this information to whatever entity that we
Depends on
decide.
so I want to make sure, because I don't want to give you the wrong thing. We're going to follow the law, but we also follow the guidance of our legal counsel. And so I just want to be, because you might say, yes, release it, and our legal counsel advises us not to do that, only to release what the Sunshine Law requires. And so I just want to make sure that, with the understanding to the best of our abilities, but if we are provided guidance that we need to not do something, then we follow that legal guidance.
Even legal guidance, so I just don't want to see the board as a whole lose that authority. That's what I'm saying.
You always ultimately retain the final authority. It's just that has been assigned, the day-to-day work has been assigned to the person that handles the Sunshine request in collaboration with our legal counsel. And we actually...
And we should... I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I interrupted you. I apologize.
We're posted for legal tonight. Let's we can further discuss that along those lines as it relates to and receive guidance around the board's authority. Okay?
Very good. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
I was going to say that I have a lot of respect for the MSBA, but because there hasn't been a change in the law, I'm not in favor of changing the policy. I don't see the motivation behind it, and I actually really like that it's spelled out. Because I think it helps build trust with the community. I'm not comfortable changing at this point the release of information. So thank you for tabling it. I was going to ask when we're down to actually put it aside for a separate vote.
I'd like to say that I agree with what you're saying, because if the only response of why change it now is to just say, we will follow the law, and then then we don't have to change it every time. Well, then we could just have one board policy that says we will follow the law, and then all other board policies are not needed, right? So, I agree, like, what's the reason for changing it now? I like the specificity of it, and I don't see any motivation to take that out. Or else we could just take out the specificity in every single board policy.
Disagree. I think sunshine law is pretty black and white, whereas there may be other areas that we need to have a board policy to really determine what our district is going to stand for. Certainly, we could reach out to MSBA and request why did they want to change this. There is an explanation after right before every single requested change here as to why we're requesting the change. And it says MSBA has clarified that the focus of the policy is district records, not day-to-day operations of the district. So I suppose that gives us some indication why they suggested the change, but we could reach out to them to get further clarification.
Okay, excellent.
So that would be, we're now moving on to school year? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you're just going to tell, do you have a problem?
I don't have a question with fiscal year. Does
Anyone
anybody?
else? Okay, move, okay, we'll go on to BB, annual budget. Good. Moving on to, scrolling down on this. Moving on to policy DJF-2, purchasing.
Yeah, I sent a question on this, and I realized staff was out yesterday, so it was a tight timeline, but I did have questions on this.
Who's fun?
Sent today.
I saw the email, but I didn't see this with the email.
I printed it. Do you want to read it while I ask my questions?
And I can just speak to it.
Go ahead, John.
So, currently, if something is more than $3,500, federal guidelines require a competitive bidding purchasing process. If it's over $50,000, then it has to be sealed bids. So with that, what districts typically have done is they just made that apply to all purchases, regardless of whether it was federal funds or not. Federal regulations were recently changed to up that limit from $3,500 to $50,000. So now, the only time we have to do competitive purchasing is if it's $50,000 or more. Now, as a district, we still have language in the policy that requires multiple quotes for those items that don't require competitive purchasing. And to kind of put that in perspective, that $3,500 cap has been in place for quite a long time. And if we think about the cost of goods and how they went up, even just over the last couple of years, it's now taking items that we didn't have to competitively bid previously, and now we do, which adds an additional workload. So I think, excuse me, I think the federal people over the policy have recognized that threshold needs to be increased, and so they've increased it to $50,000.
So this is only for federal,
The guideline is for federal.
but we're making it a policy
We have
for all of our
applied to all
expenditures.
purchases, correct. So even though we didn't have to follow that $3,500 limit for non-federal purchases, we still did. It just makes it easy and clean from the purchasing standpoint if you follow the same guidelines.
So if there was a $10,000, so like moving forward now, if there was a $10,000 expenditure,
So we were,
whereas prior to this, we would have gotten multiple bids.
yeah,
If we pass this, we will not, because it would not meet that
yeah.
threshold.
So two different approaches. So currently, under $3,500, we require 3 quotes
Okay,
before a purchase is made.
okay,
If it's over $3,500, then it has to be a competitive bid process. So it's more where we publish it and say anyone who wants to give us a price, give us a price. So what the difference, what will happen is we as a district with our internal controls will still require multiple pricing, so we're not just, so we're being efficient and good stewards, but we don't have to go through a bid process where it's sent out for a specified period of time, open it up to anyone who wants to bid, and so on and so forth. So what it does do that I really like is it probably gives us a lot more ability to support our local businesses by being able to target 3 or 4 local businesses to get those quotes from and then support them. So I do like that part of it.
It just seems like such a big leap to me. I understand the costs have gone up, but from 3,500 to 50,000 seems like we're taking, it just doesn't,
It's a big
it doesn't seem
number.
entirely responsible to me in terms of just,
It's a big number. I think we were all shocked when the federal government adjusted it that much in one leap. The flip side of that is 3,500 was way too low, and it's been too low for a long time. So I think they just made the decision to just get it to where they feel like it needs to be all at once is the best I can tell.
But we're still going to require multiple quotes.
It's just not a competitive bid process.
Right.
It's still going to go, and the purchasing agent is still going to go out and get multiple quotes, but it's not going to be open to everybody. There's just,
Like the owners rep, when we went through that process. Yep. We went through that process.
It'll allow our purchasing department to be more efficient for sure.
oh yeah, definitely.
Kelly, do you mind if I ask some questions about it?
go ahead.
So, just to make sure I understand, so the competitive bidding will now be replaced by the process we have, which is to get at least 3 bids, not bids, 3 quotes, 3 bids, whatever. But you can go select, I'm going to go buy pencils, so I'm going to go to, 3 different entities, and I'm going to take the lowest one that is responsible, somebody I think will deliver, actually. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say competitive bidding is being replaced with that, but the threshold is being increased.
Right, for under 50,000.
Right.
Now, won't be a competitive bidding process, but
That's right.
what's going to happen is we're still going to get multiple bids.
That's correct.
And take the most competitive price. So it's not competitive bidding, but it's that
That's
process.
right.
So in the email, it said that policy still outlines. Can you tell me where that is in this policy? Because I couldn't find it, and I just want to make sure it's still in there.
Yes. Let me take a quick peek at it here.
It's a lot of reading, and so when I saw the email, I had to go back and read it, and I thought, I'll just ask where it is. It didn't stand out to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when you look at the strike-through part of it, right under competitive purchasing,
It says formal purchasing methods are required.
yeah, so second sentence, employees are expected to contact multiple providers before making a decision regarding purchases under $3,500 for non-construction and under $5,000 for construction related. Okay, so that's, even though MSBA is recommending striking through that, our internal established procedures is a minimum of 3 quotes. Now, there are times where there's not 3 businesses that you can get quotes from, so there's always that exception. But the standard practice is
I guess
minimum
what
of
I'm
3.
saying is, can we have our legal put that in here, because it's not in here. It's struck through.
We can just not strike it, right?
Yeah, that portion can be,
It's our
We
policy.
have to
we're
vote
making
on
it.
that? How does that work?
It's already part of the, sorry, it's,
Practice.
it's our current policy. That
Yeah,
is
but it's struck through right now.
as a proposal.
As a proposal, yeah.
So I guess, can you, like, read it to us without the strikes so that we have a chance to?
yeah, let's see here.
Or should we do this next
See,
time?
but what we're voting on is adopting the recommended changes. We can not adopt that one.
Yes, so.
Take,
when-
you're saying
Let's pull
take
it,
this one.
let's pull DJF.
I guess that's what I'm asking is.
Let's do that.
So is that the process? We pull it, we have our, okay. Can I ask you a few more questions before we move off? These are real quick. What does it mean where it has in parentheses, urban and metropolitan districts and districts located totally or partially within? So this only applies to,
Right.
and we're under the metropolitan district?
Urban.
Urban, St. Louis, Kansas City.
Sometimes when the legislature passes legislation, it's specific to certain
Okay, so
size.
that's a quick question you answered, thank you. A couple more, real quick. Will this policy, I don't see it, I just want to make sure it's nice and tight. This policy is not going to change anything in the way that we are now seeing KCOB and how it's shared with the board. It shouldn't change.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, I'm just, asking. And then the next thing is, are services considered purchasing? Service contracts?
Yes.
Is that, so now for things under, so services fall under this, got it? And my last question is, this cooperative purchasing, we already do that, and the only reason I say that is I remember, on one of the many multitude of questions I've asked, it's come back, this is part of our cooperative purchasing. But what in the world is this? Is this suggesting that we can outsource our purchasing? Is that what this language is saying?
It can be.
What does that mean?
Well, so it's when someone else purchases on behalf of the district, so.
Maybe enough that it's something that we could go down
Could
that
do,
road.
yeah.
And I just want to make sure that all the board members understand that and are comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Do you see us going there?
I do not see that, no. However, we do have one example of something similar,
Okay.
and that is with food service. We contract our food services. And so with that, Aramark actually purchases the food on our behalf. All right, so that would be kind of an example.
So
I think
even
that's the
though-
only one I can think of.
So even though this is added, we've already been doing this.
Yes.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? It's
and-
now added.
Right.
And districts can do it.
Well, it wasn't there before, but
Right.
now it's saying we can. We're making something that we're already doing legit.
But so keep in mind, that's in the contract that we have with Aramark specifies that they do that as they go out and purchase, because we've contracted with them to handle our food operations. So I just want to make sure that
Okay.
it's a little bit
But we
different.
can contract with somebody to go out and buy all our pencils on our behalf.
Yes.
That's right.
If that were to happen, would that need board approval?
Yes.
Okay, I would feel more comfortable
Yeah.
hearing that,
Yes.
to be able to just,
Because it's an agreement with an entity.
Right.
Just like we can contract payroll
what if
services.
that agreement with that entity is lower than 50,000?
Still,
Still, it comes to the board as part of KCOG.
Yeah.
That's why, see?
Yeah,
how-
all contracts regardless of monetary value.
Can I clarify, you said that, you said that under $50,000, we would only be getting 3 bids, or 3 quotes.
We require a minimum of 3. Yeah.
Okay, we would, rather than the competitive bidding process, we would be doing a minimum of 3 quotes. And then Miriam said 3 quotes and added, of which you take the most responsible one, but I didn't hear you say that. So is it just, you just gotta get your 3 quotes and you pick whichever one you want? Or is it minimum of 3 quotes and you have some requirement of which one you have to pick?
Yeah, so again, our purchasing department, the standard is unless there's good reason not to take the lowest price, then that expectation is we go with the low price.
But as long as you have 3 quotes, regardless of which one you choose, under $50,000, job is done,
That's correct.
according to the policy.
According, yes, that's correct.
Maybe we can add that in since we're having people look at that. Take the lowest responsible bid. And by responsible, it means we're not just going to give it to anybody who's going to give it to us dirt cheap because it may not deliver, right?
But also keep in mind that when the purchasing department looks at that, they also look at the track record of that particular company. So
That's what I
I just want to make sure we,
responsible.
right, think about that.
But we are going to pull this,
I'm getting ready to read it.
Consideration.
but we still plan on voting on it tonight?
No, I'm going to take care of it in just a second.
We'll table it and bring it back in February.
We will bring it back.
February.
Yeah, we just have to change the
So when
word.
it comes back, you'll reword it and then it'll come back and we'll have a discussion.
What's nice about February is that we're going to have a study session so that we can actually have an opportunity to meet.
Okay, let's move on.
I'm sorry, that's 2 for 2.
No, did you have any more?
No, that's all I had on that.
So can we,
Move on to our next policy, which is...
no, she was the only one that contacted me that, besides the questions that Kelly had to
Oh,
have
is that
questions.
it? Okay,
That was
so
it.
that's all the policies.
No,
It was just 2, right? It was 2.
no, but I mean, there's multiple policies.
No, I'm saying, but you said that you have a question you wanted to discuss, pull in case there was an issue or concern to address. I'm saying, did we address all your
Yeah,
questions?
yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we're done.
With that
Only
policy,
on this
she
policy.
wants to move on to another policy.
No, that's what I was asking you. You have other policies?
Now she has other
Oh,
policies.
I'm sorry,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Okay, I misunderstood you, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so now we're DJFA, Federal Programs and Projects. Is that one?
I do have a question about that, just one question. So I'm reading it says solicitation, and I understand this is for federal, I just want to make sure I understand this. It has to do with unduly restrict competition. It says all notices of
Page number you're on.
Page 2.
Page 2. Yeah, solicitation of bids and proposals. It says all notices of solicitation of bids and proposals will include notice that the district encourages bids and proposals from minority businesses, women's business enterprises, service-disabled veterans, and labor surplus area firms. And then a little bit further down, it says, the bid specifications will not contain features that unduly restrict competition. And a little bit further down, highlighted, it says, except when preferences are mandated or encouraged under the applicable federal statutes. And then it lists these, statutes, sorry. And then it lists these, stipulations or expectations, however way you want to look at it. So my question is, do these stipulations, placing qualified small businesses, women's business, all this stuff, I just kept looking for competitive, and then on the next page it talks about non-competitive purchases, but it doesn't say anything about competitive purchases. The only word competition comes up here. So does this mean that these stipulations supersede competitive pricing?
No.
Okay, where do what passage am I missing? And I realize that we have to adopt this because this is for federal dollars, but I just want to make sure that I see that. Where does it say?
So I think that the policy that we were just looking at around purchasing, that is the one that guides purchasing and
So
selection.
what this says is that we want to make sure, because it goes on about, environmental, solid waste, it's everything, right? So this just saying that we want to make sure you throw your net wide enough.
That's right.
But this doesn't say that if a women-owned business is charging us twice for the same exact thing at one that's not, that we have to take that one, right?
Right.
I just want to make sure that, okay, that's my only question.
Yep.
Okay, we'll move on
Does
then.
anybody else have any questions about it? I don't have any about staff absences and tardy.
We'll move on to policy GBLB references. Questions on that one? Okay, hearing none. Move on to just scrolling here.
I have a silly question, maybe silly.
The one that we just passed?
References. And it's on several of the policies. I just, probably a legal question, but why does it state several places illegal sexual harassment as if sexual harassment can be legal? It says under sexual misconduct, and it lists different kinds of sexual misconduct. Then it lists illegal sexual harassment as defined by policy AC.
So fortunately, we have an attorney in the crowd with us tonight. Penny, you could probably answer that. But my assumption is to do that. Well, I'm not even going to assume. Penny, you want to answer that? Is there a difference between illegal sexual harassment and just sexual
It
harassment?
says illegal sexual harassment, not just sexual harassment.
I know, it's weird. It just says it's
So
defined.
when you look at that unlawful sexual harassment term, it really is referring us back to those protected classifications of individuals. When we look at policy AC, we're not just talking about sexual harassment, we're talking about discrimination for all of the protected classifications. And so I think MSBA, in an abundance of caution, has included that unlawful term just to ensure it applies to all the other protected classifications when we talk about discrimination and harassment. And so I don't think they've modified that language when we look at the sexual harassment side of that coin. That would be my understanding or impression of the language.
And I get that because I did look at policy AC, which is the one that they refer to, and they talk about illegal discrimination, not just discrimination. Because that is, I get that part for
Yes.
illegal discrimination, but I didn't, within the language, I didn't understand what it meant by illegal sexual harassment because it's a little bit different than the discrimination.
That's correct. And I think their team works to align language from policy to policy to avoid any discrepancies that could arise, and so I think that's a likelihood that they've just tried to align and have similar language throughout the policies.
It's inconsequential, really, but I just wanted to understand why they were differentiating between sexual harassment versus illegal sexual harassment.
I have a similar sort of question. Penny,
You might as well pull up a chair.
while Penny was up here, I had a similar sort of question that was on one of the policies a couple ago that reminded me.
Where are we now?
Oh, it's broad, don't worry about it. So, several times throughout these policies, I noticed where the words his or her was stricken and either just left off or replaced with they. Can you explain the idea behind that? Is there a legal basis behind that? It seemed to have no impact on the actual policy, but it seemed to be consistent, so I was wondering why someone would possibly be doing that.
I think it's verbiage. It's a choice in verbiage, and we have to remember that when MSBA puts these policies together, they're looking at it from the support of 500 school districts. So what is the standard language that is most prevalent across those districts, and then they expect that each district will modify as they deem appropriate to meet the needs of their given district. But there's no legal difference between he/she or they in the context of
Likely just the preference of an attorney that chose to do that, since it really...
Yes, as their staff has gone through and edited, a lot of the edits, the MSBA recommended edits in the policies come from their experiences and feedback that they receive from the districts that they support. And when you see the same issues or questions or requests arising across a majority of their membership, then they will make recommended changes that align with what the majority of that membership is asking about or seeking.
Penny, can I just state that linguistically there is not a difference? When we don't know the gender of a person, we just say they. Like, what did they tell you over at the phone company? Oh, they told me that I can get in the phone. When we don't know the gender, we say they. It is more streamlined than his or her.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we were at policy GCPE, resignation of professional staff members. I believe that's where we were. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question that encompasses this one and the next one. And I didn't have the question until I got to the next one, because it's all about contracted and non-contracted. So here's my question. For the sake of the policy, can you define what a professional staff member is? And would it be helpful to have that in there? And the only reason I say that is because it strikes out through employees without contracts. So what's a professional staff that doesn't have a contract? Can we have professional staff without contracts?
So most of the time when you see professional staff and support staff, the professional, is speaking to certified staff.
Right.
And that's the primary group. But it may encompass, depending on the job title and description, other leadership roles or specified positions.
So if someone has a certification, they always carry that with them.
Right.
So even if they're not in a certificate requiring position, are they still considered professional staff? Is it the person's qualifications or the person's job title?
It's the job title. So if I'm a certified teacher serving as a para, I would be support staff. Okay?
So would you have a contract? No.
No.
Because you're a para.
That's correct. But not all professional staff get contracts. And so when we kind of are working through this, you'll notice that there's different criteria for contracted staff versus support staff. And so for contracted staff, the notification time is a certain month because they are typically contracted all year, and therefore we expect them to work out their contract, and it's about giving us as early notice as we can to replace them. Support staff is not that way. They can give their 2 weeks and leave,
Well, I
right?
see that for support staff, you have contracted employees and non-contracted.
Right.
And then at the top it has, they didn't do that for the professional staff. But then it says because both are covered. I don't understand what, but we do have professional staff that don't have contracts. So why are they not in here? Why is it struck through?
Yeah,
See what I'm asking?
yeah. Why is it just not the same in both? Is that what you're saying?
Because the little explanation
I
that
think that-
MSBA gives with the parentheses doesn't make sense. It's
No,
like
this-
parentheses is wrong.
This is one of our amendments, so this is probably a mistake of mine, actually.
I totally understand
So-
where you're going, but I don't understand why.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, so really, it should probably be in both. So we probably just need to amend that.
We should just set that aside, and just work on that for next February.
Can you, because I found it confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna pull
Okay,
both.
GCPB.
And then look at the explanation. The explanation doesn't make sense.
That question, is that the revision requested by the district?
No, but then it says, which I don't know who I is, but I didn't include in GCPB, and then it ends parentheses. And then it goes on to say, because both are covered in this policy. Which policy? The GDBPB2 or the GDBP regular? See my question? Well, I'll just let you revise it.
Okay,
You understand what I'm saying?
So both of them need to be,
I have it.
She's got
I have
it, she has it. So that was resignation, and the other one is resignation of support staff. Okay, very good, we'll move on. Anyone else have, well, we're gonna revise these, so if you will. Okay, moving on to policy IF, curriculum development. We good on that one?
I have
Excellent.
question. It's a really short one. Okay. See if I can try to verbalize this. I'm trying to understand, the way I approach this is, why are we adopting this? How did MSIP 6 change in the Senate Bill 681 that makes us adopt this? There was nothing wrong with it before, we're just improving it. I'm trying to understand why we have to strike some of the things we have to strike. Like, I look at this and I think, well, what's the catch? What am I missing?
well, the first one is stricken because it's just extra words. It doesn't really have anything to do with the meaning of that particular, the first
Hard to read.
first strike. And that
Articulates the curriculum content, or what do you?
recognizes the curriculum development process.
Oh, I didn't mean that part. I'm sorry. I was talking about the guts of it. And I'll tell you, so the problem I have is with 1 and 3, what they put in. They say the curriculum will align externally to all Missouri learning standards and the English learning development standards, etc. But then number 2 says written, taught, and assessed curriculum must be aligned by the school leadership. 3, each student has opportunities to excel in the curriculum. So I'm finding 1 and 3 to be difficult to marry because we all know that everybody doesn't learn the same, things aren't the same. But I appreciate that we want Algebra 1 to be the same throughout. That can be a problem when everybody's doing what they want. So I appreciate that, but at the same time, you do have to do things differently sometimes. I just don't understand how each student has opportunities to excel under the curriculum, but then at the same time, the curriculum will align to MLS, and it's going to align across grade levels and courses. Does that make sense? And it feels like it's making it top heavy and must be aligned by the school leadership. So I know that's not what we do, but I don't understand the wording because I like the way it was before. And the things, so I have a problem with that. And then the second problem I have is I'm not comfortable with the striking out articulates the curriculum content on a district-wide basis. I think that we need to continue to be transparent. I don't feel like we've been transparent since our books left because people can't just pick up a book and see what we're teaching. I like to use as instructional materials that are effectively coordinated with the curriculum guides and programs that protects instructional materials, and I makes use of current supplementary and enrichment materials. And I know you're going to say, well, we're going to do all this. This is part of the new one. And my response to that is, I like how it's spelled out.
I think the recommendation simply comes from trying to match the language that MSIP 6 lays out around curricular expectations with our board policy. And if you look at the part being struck out, I'm pretty confident that it's aligned with the language in MSIP 5. So I think that's the whole intent of the recommendation. is just to make sure our policy matches what M6 is expecting.
And Senate Bill 681.
And Senate Bill 6.
I want to open this up to discussion. I don't want to strike those. I want to blend both languages. I feel that, I don't know. I just,
I've moved them to the side.
can we move that to the side? Is there, I mean, I get that this is what M6 wants, but as long as we follow M6, this is our policy. We can do whatever we want. And I just would feel more comfortable. Thank you.
Well, it's kind of funny that in the earlier, one of our first policies we discussed said, we're just, took out a bunch of language, said we're just going to follow the law. And this one does the opposite. It says, well, the law is new, so we're going to line up new language with the new law.
It's not a law though, it's M6.
It's state, whatever, state,
I'm saying,
Guidance.
we can do what M6 wants, we can do all this competency, and I'm sure we're gonna do great, and we're always gonna be accredited, we're gonna kick butt this year. But I like our curriculum language to be our curriculum language. I don't feel like we need to follow what M6 says. We need to use what works for us, and I really like what we had before.
and I would like the opportunity.
You have to call it M6.
No, we follow, what we had before isn't different. We can do all of M6 with the wording that we had before.
The word that we had before, but we can't not follow M6.
I didn't say we don't, no, I mean, we don't have to use their verbiage. We don't have to use their exact wording. We just have to give them the results they want. Does that make sense?
No?
We will,
We have to have a CSET plan, we have to show growth, all those things. We gotta get the 100 points, right? There's all the points, remember? We just need to get those points and follow those mandates. It doesn't mean that we have to,
I think we need to pull out M6.
I've already read it down.
we'll work on it and come
I
back.
pulled it aside. Let's go to the next one. I haven't pulled to the
Oh,
side.
this is Mary Ann's,
Baby.
what she's
my
wanting to talk
baby.
about, there may not be what? It's majority of the board.
It's to the side.
thank you for recognizing that this is my baby.
I would like to hear input from you when the time comes,
Yeah.
I'd like an input from you, because it's more valuable to me what you would like to do with our curriculum for here in Springfield versus what Desi would like to do.
Right, but just,
And I know that
They may not
that
be the
doesn't mean
same.
they have to conflict, that means there's areas to work within Desi, but also what works for us.
well, I mean, what works for us also is following the required Missouri learning standards, because if you recall, it's been a lot of our discussions, not only locally, but nationally, making sure we're in alignment there. And then, like I said, Senate Bill 681 lays out a lot of stipulations and requirements that districts must do, and they're required to do. Still have some local control on how we implement that. And so this is just my understanding, I could be wrong, it's based on what Penny said earlier, MSBA is trying to consolidate at around 500-something school districts to make it as, I'd say, generic and as general as possible. So that's why you saw a lot of things removed. It doesn't take away any of the things that we are going to do and we will continue to do, but I do see both sides of saying, okay, if it's spelled out, sometimes people don't think unless it's spelled completely out that it might not be followed. So I pulled that one out. Let us just go back and
It's
look at
super
it.
vague, it's really vague and broad.
And they've done that, I mean, as a matter to try to, right, on purpose to give you that district as a leeway, but I pulled it out.
I just see us the potential for being criticized for it by our patrons.
Read these policies, so.
What?
They read our policies.
Policy,
What's the next one?
IGAD, Career and Technical Education.
Policy IGCE-1, non-traditional instructional options, is that what we are now?
No, we're on
No,
IGAD.
IGAD.
I've buzzed on by.
Career and Technical.
Let's don't.
Yeah, what is that one?
IGAD.
Career.
I have a quick question about this one. I just wanted to know, will this affect anything that we do in our current operations? Here's an example. The name of the program, but it's a great program where we have students that are like at COGS and they go to school at full-time base.
You mean it?
Base, right. So for example, base, because there's this little part that says the board must approve, this is a new thing, at the end of the first page, almost at the end, it says the board must approve any contract, agreement, or memorandum of understanding with any of the above entities.
You do that now.
We do that.
We do- So does this have to come to us for approval? I mean,
You do that through KCOB now, through the contracts that come to you?
okay.
Yes,
So
you already do
base-
that.
So base, there's.
It would be a
understanding.
MOU with with Mercy or Cox based on the location. So you do
So that does
do those
come?
various MOUs, yes.
I just want to make sure that this wasn't going to change how we do these programs.
But remember, we're also in the process of cleaning up, making sure we have up-to-date MOUs for various programs. So there's a possibility, since you've been on the board, that maybe you haven't. And so that's part of what the EDs, Executive Directors of Learning, working in collaboration with Dr. Hackenworth's office, is making
So
sure all
expect to
these
see
programs
this
and up the range with special education, just making sure we have those things taken
And
care
so
of.
would this be like a school flex program? Because I'd never heard that word until I went to the next one.
So we moving on?
Yeah, does anybody have any other questions? Sorry.
IGCE-1, non-traditional instruction options.
It talks about the school flex program.
IGC.
Which I don't believe we currently
Okay, we don't. But that's our own mini flex program. Okay. I have one quick question on this one. It just seems contradictory. It says under dual enrollment and dual credit in post-secondary courses. The first paragraph says, let's see, dual enrollment in post-secondary courses on the post-secondary institution's campus or virtually through the post-secondary institution at the district's expense. So I was going to ask you, so we're funding this, is this coming out of our funds or A+ fund? And I don't even know how that funding is done. But then the last sentence under that heading says, district staff, including the A+ coordinator, will work with the student to secure financial aid when necessary for tuition. So I don't understand, do we pay for it or does the student pay for it?
We pay for some, we have students that qualify, the students that are qualified for free and reduced lunch receive tuition waivers, if they're taking those particular courses at MSU. I'm just trying to make sure, I want to make sure I answer this correctly. We might need to get back to you.
Yeah, there's multiple models for that.
How we
The
pay
first
for it.
paragraph says that it's going to be at our expense.
No, it
So-
doesn't. It says it may be. We
Maybe.
may enter into a contract
May.
at the district.
Oh, may enter, okay.
For dual enrollment, where students are not on campus, being taught by one of ours, in order for us to claim state aid, we have to pay for it.
Because currently we do have dual enrollment. So right now, the students that don't qualify for free and reduced lunch would pay that it's reduced. It's not what a college student would pay, right?
Yeah.
We will continue to receive that reduced fee. This won't affect it. You know how like normally you go to college, you pay, let's say $100, I'm just making this up, $100, only because I experienced this, $100 for a credit. But when a high school student is taking that course at their school.
That's dual credit, so that's different. So dual credit is on the high school campus.
Right,
That's where you get the reduced fee, and our kids usually have an option on whether they take it for credit or not.
right. So if they do take it for credit, is that still going to be reduced fee?
Yes, and they are responsible for that fee. They are responsible, the student is responsible for the
The
fee.
student is, unless they're free and reduced lunch, and that's where the third line comes in. Which is that we will work with students when necessary for tuition.
Yeah, and I know I can't speak specifically, Sheila maybe will speak a bit more than I, but we do have some programs in place to help students that need that financial support.
To work with students to secure financial aid when necessary.
When necessary.
And there is limited availability of A+ funds now while in high school for students who qualify for free reduced lunch. And I think that's something where it continues to develop. It's relatively new.
The A+ funding is not part of our general funding. It's not.
That's correct.
I just want to make sure that this isn't going to change anything we do and that this policy allows our students.
Changing
to
board
do
policy
everything.
is not going to change a contract or an MOU that we have with an entity.
We don't see that this would change anything. The intent really is about the A+ availability while in high school.
That's what I want to hear, the intent. Okay,
So this one we can keep. We don't have this one. Okay, moving on to policy JFGA, interviews with or removal of students. Questions?
I have a question. Little one and a big one. My big question is, I just don't get it, because the purpose says, right there, it says, MSBA has revised this policy to clarify situations where outside entities seek to introduce students at school. That's the intent of revising it. and they have a purpose. But then the only thing they did was strike out the paragraph that has nothing to do with outside entities. Because I read that and I say, well, does this mean that the parents, do we have to now, this is the thing, the district will not honor requests by parents and guardians to be informed prior to these discussions, be present during the discussions, or prohibit conversations between a student and staff members, because this is all part of the educational process. And why are we striking this out? What does this have to do with outside entities? There's nothing, I don't even understand this policy change.
It says to clarify.
The policy's purpose is to protect students in situations where outside entities seek. So they're taking this out because they're not outside entity, and that's why they're taking it
For
out?
entities other than district employees. So this one that they struck was about district personnel.
Right, so do we now lose this? Does this mean we have to reach out to parents every time we want to have a conversation with a student?
No.
So that's what
So
the
this-
purpose clarifies.
So is this paragraph in some other policy? Because if it's not, it needs to find a home.
Which paragraph?
The one they're striking through.
So why? If I get down to why would it?
Because right now, this paragraph lays out, school councils will meet with students to discuss academics and personal issues, teachers often, and et cetera, et cetera. And the last sentence is very critical. It says the district will not honor requests by parents to be informed prior to these discussions, be present during the discussions. So we've laid it out. And by taking it out, not that I think anyone's looking at this opens the door.
So I think what's replacing that is if you look at the second sentence in the green, where it says this policy does not apply to the day-to-day conversations between students and district employees. So that's essentially covering conversations with counselors.
Going up.
Added the paragraph.
This policy does not apply to the day-to-day conversations.
So they've added that in. Okay.
That's kind of why they could strike out.
That's why they struck that out. And so that's going to be covered. My other question, I think Kelly brought this up, which is on number 2, second page. It says, verify to the best of his or her, and it's been changed to there. And I hear what you're saying, Sharita, but in this case, because then the next word is the officers, apostrophe S, and implies one officer. It's singular.
It's singular, is not talking about the person before, and there can be singular or plural. In this particular case, when it's referring to a person's gender who we do not know.
Yeah, it just makes it confusing. It's the only place I noticed the his or her that I thought, but
There's
there's,
other his and hers in there?
well, Kelly said he'd noticed it other places. This is the only place I
There were
noticed
several
it.
places.
This is the only place I noticed it because it has to do with an officer and it immediately follows it, and I thought, I don't want people to think that there's like officers ganging up. It's fine. If everybody's fine with it, I'm fine with it.
Okay, let's see.
Student health services requirements.
Okay, yeah, JHC, Student Health Services and Requirements. Are we all good with that one? Okay, let's move on to JHDF, Suicide Awareness and Prevention. Any questions?
No, I thought this was really good. The whole CRT thing on this is great.
Okay, move on then to...
Crisis response
It's
team.
new, isn't
Yeah.
it?
You know what you about this time of night, just make sure people don't leave saying something different. Should have soundbite is correct.
I had to do a double take when I read that.
JHG, reporting and investigating child abuse and neglect. Any questions on
I have
that
a
one?
question on that one. This is the last one, right?
Is it the last one?
I think it is.
Okay,
Go ahead. Okay. Well, let me just try to, okay, so, again, it's just, apparently I don't have a legal mind. I'm finding something that's contradictory. Help me get through this, guys. So it says, under reporting child abuse and neglect, it's like they make a point of this, that no internal investigation shall be initiated until such a report has been made. This is
Where are
under page 2, and they strike out the part that says, and even then, the investigation may be limited by law if the report involves sexual misconduct by a school employee. So they cross that out because they're trying to bring sexual misconduct under just regular abuse. It's all abuse. No internal investigation. But then,
What do you, say that again, please? Well, you said what you think they're trying to do, what
so,
are
okay, so just let me finish because then I can come back to this. But then later on down, under the heading of investigating child abuse and neglect, it says, the Children's Division investigates reports of child abuse and neglect. And they specifically cross out that the district will do their own investigating. Like earlier on, they do that. I guess what I'm confused about is, does the district investigate or is it just Children's Division?
No, we still would investigate. So if you go to the next one,
You know, the part says the district will immediately notify the Children's Division of any reported child abuse
right.
and or neglect, but will simultaneously investigate. So they took that out. The above paragraphs, they took that out. So everywhere they take it out, and they basically say it's the Children's Division that investigates reports of child abuse and neglect.
This might be another one where Penny might be able to assist us, but I know in recent years, schools have been discouraged to have conversations with children because of lack of training around proper questioning. And so my assumption is that that is where that is related. Would that be accurate, Penny?
She probably doesn't have a copy of all these policies.
There was a change in the law effective this school year around the authority of school districts to investigate certain alleged misconduct, one of which is spanking. So previously, if there was a report of abuse in the form of spanking, those were referred to the district conducted those investigations, or we said, hey, you investigated on our behalf, Children's Division. We no longer have that authority. All of those are to be investigated by the Children's Division. And so we must report. Children's Division is responsible for those investigations. Our investigations will primarily be around the employee behavior, employee discipline, but the specific investigation around whether that abuse has occurred or not occurred, that determination will be by the Children's Division.
That was my understanding.
We will no longer be conducting that investigation.
When I finished reading the whole document, I said, oh, it sounds like the Children's Division is going to do the investigation, and if you're not happy with it, you can move on your complaint up to the Office of Child Advocate for Children's Protection and Services. So there's a clear line of, you move it up the chain, which is why I was confused that they left in, no internal investigation shall be initiated until such a report has been made. Are they leaving the door open that we can, if we want, do the investigation?
So we can't investigate, let's say, about the employee side. So if we're saying that an employee, if there's a report that an employee has...
No, this isn't the employee, because they struck that throughout. This is about abuse in general. Like, you see it, like a child, maybe you suspect a child is being abused by a non-employee.
And so we report that to the Children's Division. Let's say the Children's Division opts not to take that complaint. Okay? So they're going to take it as a documented call. They are not going to investigate. That does not preclude us then from investigating. So if we report it, we make our report to Children's Division, they say, we'll document that call. So they're not going to come out and conduct the investigation. You still have the authority with this language to conduct your own investigation to determine whether that conduct was inappropriate, even if it doesn't rise to the level of abuse. It may well rise to the level of abuse. You can still investigate at that point. So we don't have to only have them investigate. They can choose not to do that, then we can step in and do our
So
own.
if we suspect that a child is being abused in the home or at some place, then we can.
Well, we don't investigate in the home. We investigate our staff,
We can
right?
still investigate we can still speak to the student. We can still, or no, we can't.
No, we investigate if it's our employees.
So this is
If there's
only with
conduct
our
alleging
employees?
Our employees or our volunteers, those individuals who are affiliated with our
So
programs.
this
and
whole
our
thing only
associates.
has to do with investigating child abuse and neglect by our employees? I thought it
Well,
was
we
in
must
general.
report if we suspect there's abuse, if there's reasonable cause to suspect abuse or neglect by someone in the home. We have an obligation to report that to Children's Division, but we do not have the authority to investigate that. That is the responsibility of Children's Division.
So why is that language in there? No internal investigation shall be initiated.
So-
What are we investigating?
We investigate our own employee conduct, right?
But it's not coming under employees.
Where is that?
Talk about just reporting.
It's about reporting child abuse and neglect.
On
But
page
it
2 at the
could, but
bottom.
it could occur by an employee.
It could, so I guess this is only applicable to our employees.
Yeah,
Because
yes, we don't have the authority to investigate third parties outside our system. If there's an allegation of inappropriate conduct in, let's say, in a physician's office, we don't have the ability to investigate that. That is Children's Division's decision whether they will do that or not do that. But we have the ability, even if they decline an investigation involving one of our volunteers,
This
our
is only for
employees,
people that our students come into contact with.
that we
in
have
our-
some control
In
over,
our buildings,
or within our program.
within our program.
Yes,
This whole thing has to do with that, this whole policy.
The investigation.
being able to investigation, yes,
part.
that would be correct.
So, okay. Because they're struck through all the, okay. Under investigating child abuse and neglect, second paragraph, when Children's Division receives a child abuse or neglect report, why is neglect struck through? Because the paragraph before it says child abuse and neglect. But then in this second paragraph, neglect is struck through. Do you know why? Can you give me some insight into that? I thought it was page 3.
I'm guessing it would be difficult for an employee of the district who has abused a student to have neglected a student.
So the paragraph before that says the CD investigates reports of child abuse and neglect. In this case, it's
The
not.
children's divisions.
Children, yeah.
Yeah,
Children's
they do.
Division, I'm sorry. The Children's Division. So this has not to do with our employees. This is in general that a child is being abused.
Or neglected.
Or neglected. I'll just say in the home, just to separate them from school. So the first paragraph has to do with the home, and then the second paragraph has to
Like that
do
employee.
with
Employee of the district.
an employee. It's just not clearly laid out.
It says that, alleging the employee of the district is.
Yeah, that one says, child abuse or neglect reported. I would suspect, and I've not had a conversation with MSBA about it, that child abuse language that they took out, that or neglect, because that change in the law really was around the child abuse provisions and the investigation of abuse claims, but I don't know specifically why they would have removed that or
The rest of the
neglect.
sentence says, has abused a student. Traditionally, abuse and neglect are both considered abuse. Is there any way that you can look into, can we look into that and just clarify that? And then lastly, I swear this is the very last one. They've struck out through the whole harassment, spanking, or protection of persons or property by district staff. So there's the reasonable physical force, sometimes you have to restrain a student to prevent injury to another person or district property. Is the reason we're comfortable striking this out? Because I remember this being covered in a different policy earlier in the year.
Well, it's struck here because this is the section of law
I get
that
why
was
it's struck.
removed. Right.
This has to do with spanking, but it also removes the whole restraint part. But we have a whole
You do.
policy having to do with restraint. And so we should feel comfortable taking this whole thing out.
Yes.
Thank you.
So could you give us an overview of those policies that we're pulling out, so then we can move forward and voting on what's
So the
left?
recommended action is that the board adopt all policies as presented with the exception of BDDL, release of information, DJF2, purchasing, GCPB, resignation of professional staff, GCPB2, resignation of support staff members, IF, curriculum development, and JHG, reporting and investigating child abuse and neglect. Once again, the recommended action is that the board adopt all policies as presented, with the exception of DDL, DJF2, GCPB, GCPB2, IF, and JHG.
So moved.
Second the motion.
Okay, so can you,
Vote.
Yes, I get it.
and so now we will vote on those remaining policies.
Nita, you said DJF2, but it's DJF. Did you mean DJF?
Dash two.
I've never seen a dash 2. Oh, I see it. Okay, got it.
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
It carries.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. We're moving on. 9.01, new business. Fiscal year 24 budget timeline. Thank you.
All right, so I have Ms. Kara Stasel up here with me, and we're just going to give you a real high-level overview of what to expect as we enter budget development season. And Steve and Kelly, this will be your first time going through the full process with us. And so just kind of, this is just to set the stage of the timeline, let you know what's coming up, and just a couple of other informational items. So I'm going to turn it over to Kara, and we're going to get rolling.
All right, so this is our budget development calendar. So you can see right now we've started the budget development process, kicked off with budget managers back in December, and they are working to get their requests into us actually by Friday. And then we will bring those requests in front of the board as we present more in-depth budget presentations from March to June, and then on June 27th we'll have that final budget recommendation for the board. So this is just a high-level overview of that process. So through a variety of meetings and communications, those budget requests are brought forward to senior leaders, and senior leaders bring those to the executive leaders, and then they are reviewed and prioritized to be given to the Board of Education for consideration. And with our recently adopted new strategic plan, I just wanted to kind of highlight the priorities here that will just serve as the framework for us to prioritize the budget requests as they come in. And so current impacts to budget development. So local revenue, 2023 is a reassessment year, and we are currently anticipating growth in assessed valuation, which will result in growth in local tax. And on the state revenue level, so right now the FY24 foundation formula will be calculating our highest 3 years average daily attendance. So that would be FY22, 23, and 24. And as a reminder, we are currently running on FY20 because last March, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education came out and said that there's a pandemic provision in the statute that allows us to go back to the year preceding when the pandemic occurred. So we're running on FY20 now, and unless something changed and DESE came out and allowed us to use that pandemic provision again, FY20 would drop off and we would use 22, 23, or 24, the highest of those 3 years.
Well, what we know about that is that FY22 is going to be quite a bit lower than FY20. And even the current year will be lower, although we believe it will be improved over last year. And so if everything stays as it is currently, what we are predicting at this point is that the increase in revenue, local revenue, decrease in state revenue will essentially be a wash, and will be revenue neutral between those two items. Now, all that said, we are hearing that the pandemic provision may be extended, which would allow us to use FY20 again next year, which essentially buys us one more year to build enrollment back up, and that cushion we've been building to last one more year. So we're optimistic, and we're even hearing we might hear something relatively soon, so we'll cross our fingers on that.
Awesome. So just a review of ESSER funds and kind of where we are at. So ESSER 1 and 2 have been fully expended, and we have received reimbursement for those full allocation amounts. And ESSER 3, the total allocation was so large, and the time frame to spend it in was longer than the first two. So the district opted to split that into 2 years to be spent over 2 years. So we are in year 1, if you will, of ESSER 3. So 30 million, and then next year we'll have year 2, another 30. And this is a very familiar slide. This is really just a copy of what we presented and what was approved as a part of the FY23 budget with the categories for ESSER 3, and we anticipate that the FY24 recommendation will look very similar with similar categories. All right, so historical K-12 September enrollment. This is a 4-year kind of look of where the September count was. And so you can see FY22 to FY23, we grew overall K-12 223 students, but we are still down 1,026 students when compared to the pre-pandemic year. And again, that long-term financial impact is if that enrollment doesn't come up, we will start to see a reduction in state foundation formula. And the demographic study results we use to inform the long-range financial plan. All right, so staffing. This chart provides the number of early notices of retirement and resignations received by certified staff for the past 4 years, and then the FY23 number is as of January 2023. So wanted to kind of give you that whole picture of from January, February, March. Those are the 4-year totals, and then here's where we sit as of today. So we'll have 2 more rounds of early notifications for February and March, and we'll present that final number to you in March. All right, final slide of the evening for this presentation is just the budget presentation scheduled to the Board of Ed. We're at the January 17th one, and we'll meet back here on March 28th to go through the introduction and overview. And then I do want to point out 3 dates on here. March 27th and 29th, we'll have small group budget meetings with the Board of Ed, and I'm sure if it hasn't already, more information will be coming out from Ms. Harrington on that. And then May 24th, we'll have another round of small group budget meetings. All leading into June 27th, which will be here faster than we hope.
I would add to that on the 27th and 29th dates, something new we're going to try this year is we're going to invite all board candidates to come participate in an initial session where we do a lot of the Budget 101 stuff. That way, whoever gets elected, it will help them hit the ground running once they start in April. So hopefully all will attend, and hopefully that'll be a positive experience.
All right. Clarifications or feedback?
Questions?
I have 2 questions. Oh, wait.
I don't have any.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I
He
didn't-
doesn't have me, it's up to you.
2 quick questions. I know the answer, but in case I'm wrong, remind me again, what percentage of our funding is a state foundation? Because we're still primarily locally funded.
That's right.
State foundation is,
Roughly 30%. Yeah.
so even if the good news doesn't come down the pipe, it's 30%, but you feel that the increase in local revenue, which is 70%, is going to, so there's all the little ones. I get there's all those different, the proxy one and all those other ones, but that this will account for this loss.
Yeah, so we know, I think December CPI landed about 6.5%. And so what that means is this is a reassessment year, so we can capture all of the assessment growth up to a maximum of 5%. We're making an assumption that everyone's property is going to be reassessed for more than a 5% growth based on what we've seen in the housing market. So with that said, I think roughly 10 million is kind of what we estimated. And then a similar number, 9 to 10 million, is what we would expect to get a decrease in the foundation formula.
Because we're just in a different situation than some of the smaller rural districts. You know, I'm grateful that we don't have to do everything just to get our enrollments up. We just do the best we can. and people will eventually come, but that we don't make decisions just to have more bodies in the buildings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think we're always in a good place. My second question has to do with slide 9. So this is certificated staff, which sort of correlates with professional staff. So basically teachers, mostly, probably, are in this category. And this had come up earlier in the year over the summer when Kelly had brought this up, the idea of exit interviews. And so I wanted to ask, when can we expect to see the data for the exit interviews so that it can help us with our, as part of our strategic plan with staff retention, and how we can improve, and all the things we did do right, but still people decided to leave, all that. And if there is an issue with having people fill out exit interviews, if there is a plan for incentives for exit interviews.
So typically, we compile that at the end of the year, but we certainly can pull it together and provide that information, like what we have right now, provide that information to the board. Our current method is that we provide a survey to those who have submitted their notification, and a face-to-face is optional. We're kind of exploring ways to get more face-to-face engagement. We have not talked about incentives, but that's something that we can definitely discuss. But we can pull the information we have currently together and share that out to the board.
So like summertime, maybe we could expect, once the academic year is over.
A full summary, yes. But we could probably in the next week or two include it in a board update.
Oh.
What we know based on the current resignations.
You mean the exit interviews based on
That's
the
right.
resignations?
Exit surveys,
Exit
yeah.
surveys. Could you include what percentage of the people who left, who are separating, actually filled it out? Would you give us
Yes,
that?
we can do
Because
that.
obviously we want to have a higher number.
For sure. Yes.
Thank you.
Can I ask, do I recall that, is this the first year that we offered that incentive for the early?
No, we've offered it
We've done that in the past?
multiple years, yeah.
Okay.
This is the first year where we essentially made it permanent by adding it into
Okay.
the policy. Yeah.
And the other question, on one of the other slides, it said that our FY24 funding can be based on the up to 3 years prior enrollment, and it said 22, 23, and 24, so the current year. So fiscal year 24 funding can go off of fiscal year 20, that wasn't a typo, fiscal year 24. So when do those,
So state statute allows
when do
you.
those numbers come in, and when is the money received if it's in the same year?
So you're allowed, I was going to say what I was going to say, but, so you're allowed to run on the current year, which you can estimate what you think your ADA is going to be at if you're in a growing enrollment situation, or you're seeing, high attendance numbers than previous years. So if something were to happen next year and we're anticipating a larger enrollment than 22 or 23, we can estimate and be paid off of that. Otherwise, you go back to your 2 prior years and those, if you believe those would be higher.
But if we choose not to estimate, and we do a prior year, and we get to the end of this year and it is higher than either of those, then DESI automatically applies that at the end of the year and does a reconciliation.
And if you overestimate, does it reconcile?
You can pay it back.
Oh, really? So if somebody overestimates for 24 and they get paid for it, they have to pay it back?
Yeah.
Which has happened to us
Which is just like
years ago.
Yeah. Which is what?
holding taxes.
It's like taxes, right? I know, I thought that was a typo, I wasn't gonna say anything, so you really can estimate it. Huh. So when you pay it
I've
back-
never estimated, I've been too scared.
Do you have to
So,
pay interest rate, or is it just free money on loan? I mean, it's a loan, basically.
Yeah, I think you
Okay.
just pay it back.
They take it back from you the next November. So
The what?
they will take it back from you the next November on November's payment, so.
Take it out of your check.
Okay, any other questions?
Hey, great. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. We'll move on. Thank you very much. So now we're moving on to Enterprise Resource Planning System, 10.01. So John, do you stay up there?
Yeah, and I'm going to have Bruce join me.
Okay.
So this is the agenda item I've been dreading, I'm not gonna lie. But as you all are aware, we about, I guess it was April of last year, we approved going with, too much going through my mind up here. Oracle, thank you. As our new enterprise resource planning system. And so the goal was, as you recall from the human resources audit, they recommended that we explore a system that was more comprehensive because we had all these different software systems for HR, business services, so on. So we went out to bid, we brought Oracle to you. I think Steve and Kelly were asked to approve that at one of the first meetings without knowing much about it. And we've started the implementation. The timeline that we presented was a very aggressive timeline. We knew that from the outset. We knew that everything would have to go without a hitch for us to hit the July 1 as we had hoped. In short, the business side of it was going to be about 11 months to go live, and the payroll HR was about 14 months, which is extremely aggressive. So with that said, as we've went through the process, things have not went off without a hitch. There has been way more build out in the system than we anticipated. We've had some staffing turnover that was unanticipated that caused some delays, and we're coming to you asking to extend the implementation date, which unfortunately also requires additional cost and build out and support from High Street, our implementation team. So Bruce is going to real quickly kind of run through the why behind it. We'll talk about the cost, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Wolford. So yeah, we are just going to run through the reasons as to why we're requesting the extension, what that new timeline looks like, what we really anticipate to get out of this, because that's really key here, and then what that overall project cost looks like. So just heading right into our reasons, we come back to what is the project goal here, and that truly is an opportunity to transform our business operations here. So being able to replace the system top to bottom is truly an opportunity to rethink how we do business. And we know that this was precipitated from the HR audit and many other pieces where we knew there were inefficiencies. So as we continue to move forward, we also continue to look to how can we remove inefficiencies, how can we ensure the future of operations for SPS. And every decision has compounding effects as we go through it. So part of the work has been to identify what are some of those data integrity pieces that we need to address through the implementation. And as we make those decisions, there's additional decisions to be made and changes. And so we know through this transformation process, there's going to be lots of pieces to be unearthed. And we do that by understanding our current business processes and aligning those with how the system best functions. And so we've already spent about 10,000 hours total between SPS staff and High Street staff working through all of this work. So that's really where we look at a project of this size. We know we'll run into challenges. So like Dr. Mulford was saying, here's some of the hitches that we ran into. So first off is our payroll delay, and I'm going to come back to this on the next slide, but right now we're estimating we need about 3 more months to effectively build out the payroll side of the house here. We know that we've been dealing with data consistency issues. That was one of the audit findings that came forward. And as we work through that, we know that there's additional validations that have to go into that to ensure the new system is set up properly. Like Dr. Mulford said, we've had some staffing capacity issues as we've had some resignations. I just want to say our payroll team is fantastic. I've been so impressed with just their commitment to our staff. Through all of this, they're currently still down 3 staff members of 7, and they ensure that payroll is met every 2 weeks, which is amazing. So I just have to say, payroll, that team continues to impress me. We also come back to that aggressive timeline. And just to put this timeline in context, the state of Missouri has also adopted Oracle Cloud Fusion as their new ERP and HCM solution. They adopted it in June of last year. They plan to go live 24 months after for just the ERP, and then 4.5 years later for payroll and HCM. And so we're looking at trying to turn that around in a year. The state of Missouri is looking at 4. 2.5 years. So we knew that it was an aggressive timeline, but we did that because we know there's an urgent need to. So we want to continue to address that need. But it has resulted in some of our staff members being overloaded with balancing implementation with their day-to-day work. And then finally, just the system change is significant. So Oracle has a ton of capabilities that a lot of K-12 specific softwares do not. And so the team's really been digging in, but it's definitely a growth opportunity. We've been learning lots of different ways to skin this particular cat and make sure that we get the best bang for the buck as we kind of move forward with the implementation. So kind of coming back to that payroll delay specifically, we had kind of 3 specific items to highlight. First is the data conversion. So as we've been working through addressing inefficiencies and those data integrity issues, we've had to make decisions, but we've had to understand the system to do that. So as we were working to make those fundamental decisions of how do we structure data, how do we host positions, how do we do all of this work that's delayed, how we structure the data in the new system as well. So that came into play with data conversions. The resourcing issue that we talked about of just resignations within IT, payroll, and other business service staff has definitely played a factor of that. But also on the flip side, the High Street team actually increased their payroll staff because of the complexity that we run into, knowing that we've got a lot to work through and how we ensure accurate payroll going forward. That comes to that final piece here, payroll processing. We have a pretty complex salary schedule because we offer compensation in lots of different ways to employees, which is great. We just have to make sure that it's always accurate, that we streamline that work. And so working through the salary schedule has taken quite a bit of time on how do we best do that in the new system. And we continue to make decisions on how to streamline that work to ensure good execution around payroll. So that's really kind of all the reasons as to why we're recommending an extension here. Here's what our new timeline would look like. We'd originally planned to go live for finance and procurement April 1st. We would push that back to July 1st. There's a reason for that. Then second, we will look at our HR and payroll and push that back from July 1 to January 1. So the reasons why we're looking at this is as we looked at the extension, we first came up with how do we want to approach this? Because there's lots of different ways to approach an extension project. The goals we really came back to are we need the additional time to ensure good knowledge transfer. We need to make sure our staff are confident in using the system, but also to ensure we can do the proper validation through the process. We also wanted to address our staff capacity to ensure that they can do high quality work in their everyday work while balancing implementation of the system. And then finally, and I'll say very importantly, the payroll testing has to be completely accurate. So it's normal in these projects to do parallel payrolls where you run out of your current system, then run out of your new system, and you get down to the dollars and cents and make sure you are paying everyone exactly right. And that's part of what this extension will allow is full parallel payroll comparisons so that we ensure we're paying our staff correctly, which is highly important in this project. So as we established those goals, we looked at how long should we look at an extension here. That came to these opportunities for a smooth transition. So the reasons we picked these dates came to a fiscal year end. So by aligning our financial go live with the end of the fiscal year, it makes it much cleaner on how we convert the data, but also how we go back and do the auditing of that 1 year's record. So we know that we're going to be audited every year on our financials. This means that all the auditing and reporting will come from one system, and then we start fresh on the next system. Same thing on the calendar year end. So as we look at HR and payroll, that will mean that we complete our tax season out of one system, complete the taxes out of that system, start fresh on taxes in the next system. So that should really create a very smooth transition for both data, but also for staff. And then additionally, that knowledge transfer is just another piece of the puzzle here. We keep coming back to it, ensuring the staff members are confident in using Oracle to run SPS. So all of that said, we really come down to here are the anticipated benefits of the proposed extension. So first is payroll improvements. As we move to a fully digital time and labor solution, this is an opportunity to make sure it's very smooth for our employees, ensuring that we're paying them correctly. and that we have the most streamlined operations around payroll possible. Additionally, we anticipate staff capacity will be greatly improved by extending this out, allowing them to balance that workload, having that team knowledge and that knowledge transfer occur even further addressing the data consistency, going back to our audit findings. This allows us to maintain the scope of the project, ensure everything gets done that we set out to do. And then finally, that calendar alignment really makes going forward very, very clean. So those are the benefits that we see. As we look at the overall project costs, we know this is a big number, so just under $700,000 a year for investing in this project. In terms of the overall cost of the project, just under $4 million was the total cost for implementation. So that comes out to about an 18% increase in the overall implementation cost. And for that, we're getting a 39% increase in the time needed to complete the implementation. The reason for that is the normal run rate, so the average cost per month, has been about $285,000 a month. We're going to come in right over $100,000 for this extension. So we're not using all the resources for the extension. We're going to focus on just the ones needed to ensure we can extend and ensure that we go live successfully with the Oracle. And so we also know that we need to look at how can we continue to mitigate those cost impacts. So one, with the extension, we're able to bring that document scanning that we had looked at back in-house. So that will cancel a purchase order for about $110,000 that we had already agreed upon. We'll bring that in-house and perform that work. Currently, we're about halfway through the project. We've only utilized about 30% of the travel expenditures. We had about $135,000 allocated for travel. So we'll continue to monitor that and ensure that we're using and balancing that travel budget appropriately. And then finally, this last piece is just a piece we continue to do is as we get more confident in the system, what can we take on and where we may be mitigating some costs related to that. So with that, anything more to add?
Yeah, so I'm sure you have questions around that. One thing I'd like to remind you of is the bulk of the cost for making this switch was around implementation and support. And that cost was determined based on a projected amount of hours the team would need to dedicate. The reason we're coming to you with additional costs is because those hours were under projected. That's kind of the short of it. And it's taking more time and taking longer to do that work. So with that said, we'll open it up for questions that you might have.
John, I'm going to go ahead at this time and get a motion on the table in a second, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the recommended action is the action item that the Board of Education approve the purchase of the Oracle Cloud Fusion ERP solution with High Street IT as presented. So we do have a motion. Okay, do you have a second? A second. Mary Ann. Okay, so now we have a motion, we have a second. So now we're open for questions.
I'll piggyback on what you just said, because I think you just answered my question. My question was, would we have this additional cost if we had correctly predicted the timeline? And I'm hearing from you that the answer is yes. If we correctly predicted the timeline, we'd already be paying this additional $700,000. And I think the audit showed that this was not really an option. We had to do something. So I just see that this was, we miscalculated the time frame, but it's not going to get done at that time frame. And had we correctly calculated the time frame, we'd have this cost anyway.
And I would add, what we do not want to do is roll it out and it not be fully ready, because then we're right back in the same situation we were in. And one thing I would share, I know Kara has talked with multiple entities who have went through an implementation process, and a common theme that they have shared is don't rush it and don't skim. Because some of them shared experiences where they ran into the same scenario and they didn't opt to do the additional work, and they've had all kinds of issues. And then others have shared that they use that additional time and roll out was smooth. So I think as much as it's hard to swallow, and it's hard for me to swallow, and it's hard for me to stand up here and ask you to commit another $700,000 to this project. But at the end of the day, it's what we need to ensure that we're best prepared for the long term, and that we roll out a product that is going to be beneficial to all of our employees.
And rolling it out early is probably going to cost us more money in the long run than just doing it correct the first time.
Almost all those entities said they didn't spend the money, but then they've had to come back and do it, and they wish they would have just done it from the outset.
And I know we have new board members, but I believe when we had the HR audit, part of our problem and what came forward is the audit is in the system we had before. We did exactly what we don't want to do now. Was that we didn't fully use the system we had before, and we kind of went the cheap route on that. Am I right, Bruce?
Yeah, we don't want to roll forward what we're currently doing.
And that's kind of what we did that got us where we were with our issues, trying to be good stewards of our district money, but we ended up not doing that because we didn't have the system that we needed. And I would also like to compliment the fact that through all this changeover within our department, that we still have 3 very dedicated individuals in payroll that are keeping our entire staff paid. To me, that's amazing with all the staff we have. So we want to say thank you to those individuals.
For sure, and I would add to that, payroll, business services, HR,
Yes.
all kind of experiencing similar things, doing their full workload while on top of that, trying to get this implementation. And I mean, it's visible, it's wearing thin on our people. This extension, I think, will be extremely helpful as we look to ensure that everything goes off the way we want it to.
I think there are other comments, maybe.
Yeah, I just have a question, or a couple of questions. Did we use High Street for activities that would have been done by those who quit? And
For the payroll processing specifically, yeah, the payroll team has kept payroll going.
No, not for payroll, but for the implement. You said increase the terminal scope and staff and skills and competency.
So we set out the RFP, they bid and provided those services. One of the things we can look at doing as we move forward is whether or not we still want them to perform all of the work, or if there's pieces we may want to perform to see if we might be able to mitigate that risk. That's kind of
Are we hiring those extra 4 people, or are we trying to?
Oh, we're trying. It's just vacant, but we're trying.
And so how confident are you can meet this deadline?
Very confident with this timeline.
So, that's fine. Is this a not to exceed contract? Like you gave us an estimate of 198,000 or whatever, but this is
Yeah, so this extension reflects, much like the initial, a projected amount of additional hours that we're expecting to be dedicated to the project. So if it exceeds, which we're not planning on it, but if it does, we would then have to come back to the board. So
that's my biggest fear is that we would exceed again. So, you work to get it, so we don't come back to the board.
Also my biggest fear. Yeah.
we feel pretty confident that this will get us where we need to be.
I have a few questions. So on slide 10, and I was looking at you when you were talking, and maybe I have looked at this and I didn't really catch, the acronym CRP, what is that?
Oh, that is a conference room pilot, and so through the implementation, we do 3 of those to test the functionality of the system, give feedback, and iterate. Yeah.
Okay, got that, thank you. And on slide 15, tell me a little bit more about this document scanning, because apparently I missed it. So we have, what is this agreement we have that we're canceling? I just don't recall it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's been hot in it. So last year, we actually put out a bid for data cleansing and scanning services. As we got into it, it became very clear that it was about scanning our documents, which we've
That's
still got.
taking what's in paper and digitizing it.
Exactly. Yeah, getting rid of all the paper, so it's
So
all in
everything
one
can then
system.
be uploaded into the system.
Yeah,
Basically-
as we've gone through it, we've determined we can pull that in-house and cancel.
Oh, so we were gonna do this, but now we're gonna pull it back in-house, and that's gonna save us $110,000.
Right, because of the aggressive timeline, we knew we wouldn't have time to do it.
But now we're gonna have time to do this.
Yes.
And so we're gonna do it in such a way that all this can get incorporated into the backbone of Oracle. Okay, so that's question 2, thank you. I realize we're 4 employees short, and so we're saving that money that we have to pay them in the document scanning and reducing travel. But where's the rest of the money coming? Is it this year's budget, next year's budget?
Most of it will be next year's budget.
Okay, so we have time to build that into the budget.
That's right. However, Bruce will be using a portion of his software budget that he has available this year.
For this year, so we can cover it next year. And it's gonna come out of, not capital budget, it's just gonna come out of regular budget.
Yeah, I think it is capital.
It's capital.
It is capital budget next year, but then this year you're gonna.
And this year is still capital as well.
This year is, from IT capital. Got it. And lastly, I'm not implying anything, I'm just wondering, since we're having a hard time filling these positions, by moving towards this efficient, streamlined operation, could this be an opportunity in the future, when we're all ready and going, to not have to fill all 4, because it's more streamlined?
Our size, I mean, we would not see that for a couple of years before we would be able to make that assessment.
So in a couple, so that's ultimately the goal, is to not just be better, but also be efficient.
Efficient, but it doesn't ever mean being efficient by reducing staff, but being efficient with the services. I just want to make sure 4 years from there, you say, okay, Grady, you told me we could, I want to make sure.
Just in general.
It could lead to that. We don't know that.
Computers help
Right
us.
away. Right.
But what we do know is, no matter what department, employee group, we're understaffed across the district, right? That's just the nature of school districts. So our payroll department, our HR department, business services, they already probably produce more than what they should produce with the labor they have. So number 1 goal is helping it be more efficient, to ease their burden and stress on them.
Their stress, but it doesn't sound like their stress is going to be eased even when this comes on. They're still going to have.
Not initially, but 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we might gain some efficiencies.
So eventually the burden will be reduced. So they can maybe see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, yes. We'll make sure.
Okay.
And also focus on more proactive work.
Thank you.
Questions? Were you done, Mary?
Yes.
So I've heard many times it being expressed how aggressive of a timeline this has. I don't recall that being expressed. That I was new board. We were being asked to approve $4 million for this, and I recall there were something like 20 other options. Something like 19 of those were cheaper than this. And we chose this one, and we were told it would be $4 million. So now we're being told later, no, sorry, it was 4.7. When we were making that decision of why we should spend so much more money on one, I don't recall being told how aggressive this is and any risk of not meeting that. So who helped establish that timeline and budget? Was it High Street, or was it us, or was it both?
So through the RFP process, what we do is pull other example RFPs across the state, across the nation. And so we use that to gauge what are the timelines other school districts are using. And so we had put several of them together. We saw anywhere between 9 months for just a financial system, all the way out to 30 to 36 months for all of it. We knew that we needed to be aggressive because of our audit findings and that we have an urgent need. So we landed more on we're looking for about a 15-month implementation. That was kind of where we landed on wanting to go live. Also looking at where the calendar was. So it was really kind of a calibration of what are we seeing in kind of the industry and the market with what our needs are, and that's where we landed on that time frame. So that's what was put out to bid through the RFP process. High Street then sent their proposal in on what would it take to hit that time frame. And kind of like what Dr. Mulford said, about hitting any hitches through that process, but we've hit some hitches, that's where we're at today with.
So we said High Street, we want to do this in 15 months, and they said, okay, it'll cost this much. We think you can meet that goal?
Yeah, that was what their response was that we accepted. Exactly.
And to be more clear on that, they said this is how much time we think it will take in the implementation, and this is what it will cost for that amount of time.
So did they dive in and agree with your timeline? They're the ones doing this, implementing this in lots of districts, right?
Right.
So conceivably, they should be able to look at it and provide an accurate timeline. And they gave us a timeline and we've missed it. So is that our fault or is that their fault?
But can I just speak to that? So it's not necessarily that we missed it. So think about implementation, and actually having gone through this in other districts before. The factors working against us is we could keep going full speed ahead, but we're dealing with, at the time, staffing. We didn't have a staffing shortage in payroll. We were up against trying to address the audit findings, address our risk assessments that we were encountering and we still encounter under the old system. And so we were, but when staff, the people who are going to actually utilize the system, training in the system, and as we think about a rollout, once again, that feedback of, hey, we need to slow this down just a little bit, we need to go back. So yes, it's a collaborative process between the district and the company based on other districts that they work with, but until you get started in the process, you don't know what you don't know until you are fully immersed in it. So I wouldn't say it's a fault on either side. It's just also trying to take care. Kara's back there shaking it out. I don't know if you want to say something, because she's actually the person who lives it through payroll of that feedback that was involved. Like I said, they're doing double work. They're learning this software program and still doing all their day-to-day functions.
So what I would say is last year when we brought it to you in March or April, right, we weren't in the same situation. Now I found myself with a payroll shortage issue, a staffing issue, where I have 3 out of 7 people trying to run a payroll for this large district and trying to do the immense work that it takes to do the implementation, and not only the implementation, but best practice review of our practices. So that takes time, that takes conversation. We're not just taking what we have in Munis or Talent Ed and then just dumping it into Oracle and going forward. We're sitting down and having conversations about our GL structure, our hiring practices, how we have things structured, and looking into every procedure and process, and even sometimes board policy, to make sure all these things are aligning to culminate into the best product that we can do, and that's taken a long time. Then you take the staffing shortage on top of that, those conversations now take a little bit longer to have, because there's duties that have to happen in this implementation. You may recall my director of business services actually left us this fall. She was deep into the work of this implementation, and then that separation happened, which created kind of a ripple effect of she was deep into it. Now there's no one. I had to dive deep into it and fill that role. So there were just a lot of things that we didn't know were going to happen last April. And one of the most exciting things for me has been the best practice conversations that we've had, conversations I've had with other districts who have done this and implemented Oracle, and being able to get their feedback and know kind of which things to dodge to help us in this. I mean, it's been invaluable. And I'm the no person on the budget, right? Like, if you look around this room, I'm the person going, no, how are we going to pay for this? And I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart, it kills me to come and ask you guys for this, but I know it's the right move for our district, for our staff, and for this overall process. So thank you. Hop on my thoughts.
And I'm glad Karen mentioned the process improvement, because we completely failed to really mention that, but that is a huge component. So we're taking a critical eye on all processes, trying to get those right things in place. And again, those conversations have taken longer than anticipated. And from the High Street perspective, what we have to keep in mind is they've got team members dedicated to our project. And so if there are things on our end that cause delays, that team's still dedicated. They still got to pay them. And that's really kind of what we've ran into around that cost. So I think, they projected based on what they knew, and this is a result of things we didn't.
And they're billing hourly?
I think, do they have hourly rates?
Set hourly rates, and then they estimate out the time needed for the estimate. to get
And maybe
to
this
get
is
that.
what Scott was getting at. So if we lost important human resources to help us get there, then it would make sense that we weren't able to commit as much time to it because we had less people. It would seem that we would have less people to interact with and work with High Street, so that they would be billing us less hours because we aren't as efficiently pushing it forward. Unless High Street is picking up slack, which I think is what Scott asked, was High Street picking up pieces that were vacated because we were missing personnel?
So I can talk from the payroll perspective. So the two people that we had dedicated to help implement Oracle, High Street had recommended, hey, you need to take kind of one person and kind of pull them off of their normal duties and dedicate them to this project. That sounds great, but that doesn't really happen. So we had two people on the payroll side fully immersed and dedicated to this project. And we had other staff behind doing the work. When they left and separated from the district, now these two people are doing both. So High Street's not picking up any payroll processes or doing any of the workforce. We're still doing all of that same work and the implementation and the conversation. So that means instead of leaving at 5 o'clock at night, that may not happen, right? And instead of having a full weekend off, they may be working something.
But I would think if we are dragging in the process, and High Street is billing hourly, that we would be saying, we're not moving the ball forward as quickly as possible, but the same amount of hours to get from start to finish complete would be the same, even if you move the goalpost again.
So-
And they're not being billed for the internal conversations that we're having about processes and stuff. So if they're not a part of that conversation, then they're not.
So Kelly, that was my same question. We had a meeting with High Street around this, and that was my same question. And the answer they gave actually made a little bit of sense, as much as I hated to admit it, but at the end of the day, when they assign teams to a project, they're committing those people a certain amount of hours per week to that project. If the customer has delays, that doesn't change the fact that their people are still committed to our district for that project for a set amount of hours. They can't just, these projects are too large to piecemeal.
So they're not billing us in actual hours worked on the project, they're billing us in hours as it relates to salaries that they have to pay.
Well, it's a projection of this person needs to be committed for this many weeks at this many hours a week. And that's how they assign people. And then
Sounds like it's a salary situation.
Yeah.
So it's a fixed price
Yeah.
bid, but then they estimate those hours.
Yeah, so they bid, we'll see
But
it
it's
through
still a
April
fixed price
1st
bid.
and be there to hold your hand the whole way, and we estimated that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, next question. It looks like we're about 10 weeks away from where our original goal was to start rolling things out in April 1st, is that right?
For business services, yeah.
As the first of multiple deadlines, right? Why now? Why do you need our approval now, on the tail end of a holiday, in a combined session, first reading and vote, with 10 more weeks? Why do you need a decision today? Because
Well,
it
what we
seems
know-
to me like 6 weeks from now,
Yeah.
you're going to have time to pour more into it and have more information and firm up numbers and make sure,
Yeah.
because we'll be further along in the process and know what's needed.
Yeah, so from a payroll and HR component side, we call it HRM, we know we're not going to hit July 1. That's the deadline. We know we're not going to hit it. So that has to be moved. And what we're hearing from High Street is it's going to take an additional 3 months to get us to where we need to be. So from that, the conversation we had amongst the two departments was, if we're going to push that timeline, would it be also possible to push the business services side to July 1, just because our team right now is feeling the stress of that implementation coming up, along with a lot of other end-of-year things that have to occur, and it would just allow for a better, deeper understanding of the new system.
So the April 1 deadline is more doable, but
Correct.
because you're asking for extension,
That's right.
so it's the July deadline you're asking to extend.
That July has to happen.
Okay.
April, we
Well,
get paid.
so that makes my question even more. So now it's not this necessary deadline that we know we're not going to meet. We're saying this 4 months ahead of time now. So why now? Why not get a decision from the board in May or June where you have more information, you're further along to know exactly what that budget's going to be?
Yeah, so these two might be better suited to speak to it, but it goes to the things that have to occur before the go live date. Right? You can't wait 4 weeks before the go live date and say, oh no, we're going to push it. Because so many other things have to happen in preparation for the go live. So, including the trials, Bruce referenced running the side-by-side on payroll to ensure there's no errors, running the business services side-by-side in sufficient time to make sure that it is functioning the way we want it to. So that's kind of, you guys can add anything to that.
I mean, a big consideration for me when you think of the business services side and like the payroll HR side, they still are going to need to talk to each other, right? So we're going to go live April 1st or July 1st. So there was going to be about a 3-month time gap to, I don't know what the correct IT terminology is, that kind of bridge that gap. When we knew we weren't going to meet July 1st, my thought was, why are we going to go live when we are a fiscal year July to June? Why are we going live April 1st when I'm going to have the auditors, our financial auditors, then go into 2 different systems? It's budget development time, hot and heavy in April, and so why not just push that up to July 1st and make the gap between those not 9 months or something, but more of a 6-month instead of a 9-month gap. So kind of shortening that gap as well between the 2 systems, not being go live. For me, a July 1st makes more sense from a fiscal perspective of a go live instead of an April 1st as well. So.
Yeah, and then I would just echo what Dr. Mulford was saying of planning ahead. So we're looking at month by month all the pieces that have to be accomplished. And so they have to dedicate those resources ahead of time if we're going to go forward with this. Then also to echo what Scott said, we want to come back and keep one time. We have this change, now we have this change, now we have this change. We want to wrap it all together so that we can ensure we effectively plan the rest of the project to ensure this is how we go live, that this is the successful implementation.
In the interest of moving this along, especially since we have executive session tonight, I do make a motion to call questions.
I want to ask you.
We're still, this is a $700,000 decision we're being asked about here, and I think if we go home late
I'm not
tomorrow.
done asking. I have one really quick question. Let me jump in and I'll let you go back. So we have 3 employees left in the HR and payroll. Are they paid hourly or salary? So when they're working after 5 o'clock and they're working on the weekend, are they getting compensated?
The people who have been working have been exempt, so they...
Okay, so they might walk too. So they, what do you mean exempt? So they're
They cannot get over
salary.
Their salary, yes.
Okay, that's my understanding. Thank you.
And we did just hire someone, so we're up to 4 staff with
Oh,
3 openings.
okay. But all 4 are salaries.
No, 2 were hourly and 2 were salary.
So when hourly people work over 40 hours, they get paid overtime.
I think we do need to check to see, because our time is going on. Do we have anyone else that has a question other than Alex has had before?
No, my questions.
Okay, Scott? Wait, I'm sure you will. Carry you back to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll just finish by saying I'm just having a hard time understanding why this needs to be put on us immediately now, and we can't. I know you tried to answer that question. I'm just not fully getting there. So personally, I'm inclined to vote no on this, just to say, hey, take another 6 weeks, double down, and come back to us with as solid information as you can. When we actually have to make that decision, I want as much information as possible. That's my position on it. Is rather than to say right now in mid-January, we know we can't meet July. There's just so much time between now and then to say, hey, let's double down a little bit longer and see if we can at least decrease that $700,000 ask to something else. But that's just my position.
Help firm it up. I wasn't thinking about that angle. Would 6 weeks make a difference in whether you can plan appropriately? Could it help us save?
I don't believe so. I mean, we're at where we're at.
I think it'll actually reduce risk on the uncertainty on the High Street side of whether or not we are going to extend the same resources and potentially could mean that we don't have the same people involved in the project.
But if we approve this tonight, High Street has committed the same people.
Okay, good. So we have a motion and a second, but yes, now we can vote, so let's go ahead.
No, I'm not.
I didn't understand what you meant.
I think I have a pretty good grasp on
Holding my question.
what,
So, okay.
what you, so.
So you don't have anything, because you're an HR guy, so I'm interested in what you have to say.
I'm very familiar with the process. I don't see a problem with it. I think they have valid responses, and unfortunately, we're in this, we're either going to spend it now, or we're going to spend it 4 or 6 months down the road, and it may end up being more money by then. So right now, I just feel like my back's against the wall, in a sense, because I don't want to spend the money, but I'm going to vote yes on it.
So you do HR for a living, so you think proceed?
Yes.
I mean, that's important to know.
And they have told us how much they hate to come to us for this, but it's their business. They're doing this, so they know what.
I would not like to be in that position. I mean, I've been there before. I've seen it happen, so.
If you shared some of that with us whenever we first went through this ask. It's a big ask.
I try not to talk too much.
Okay, ready to go? Let's vote. Amy, oh, yeah, we all have a vote up, and it's a great thing we all have the opportunity to vote as we go.
We know this was a tough discussion, but we appreciate your time and your feedback.
So we know that except for you and you. And so, best as can be as much as we are where we are. What, please?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so motion carries. Let's moving on to change orders and agreements.
So before I dig into this, a little bit of a celebration. We moved into Hillcrest today. All of our students and staff were able to move into the new wing. But kudos to a lot of people that made this happen, from the team that was able to get all of the teachers' supplies boxes moved over the weekend. That first took a lot of work from our teaching staff to get all of that ready. We did have one teacher that actually had 130 boxes herself. If you knew the subject matter, you know why. But getting that moved over, and then having our custodial maintenance teams doing the things necessary to make sure that this morning went smoothly. Some time put in over the weekend on the holiday to get that taken care of. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them, but also that big celebration. And I know next week we'll be having ribbon cutting to really celebrate it. So, but the list that you have in front of you, primarily the large majority of this is a result around, first, we've got custodial equipment that's needed at Jarrett and at York. We also have audio-visual equipment at York. There's a small number of change orders there. The most recent ad that I sent you the email last week about around the engineering request for services for civil engineering for our potential 2023 projects, Reed, Pipkin, Pittman, and Watkins. Some clarity around that. When we approve architect contracts, they have within their contracts mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineer fees, the MEP fees, as well as structural. We handle all the civil fees on our end as a district. It's kind of that delineation between architects handle everything that's regarding the building, and then we take care of the site fees. And so initial conversations with our architects indicated we do need to get civil on board, if at all possible, to deal with surveys, and then the work that they need to do through schematic design. And so you'll see those fees there. And again, those will be paid for out of the unspent 2019 bond funds that we have, which was also the funds that we allocated for our architect fees to begin this work. So the overall ask this evening is $202,449.62 for your consideration.
I make a motion that we approve change orders and agreements as presented by Dr. Knoll.
We have a motion, we have a second, Sharita, second, so at this time, Okay, hearing none, we will vote. Okay, moving on to 12.01, Proposition S Communication Update.
Okay, so we thought this would be a good opportunity to take just a few minutes. We'll go really quickly just to give an update on where we are with our plan to communicate Proposition S and the projects that are up for consideration in April. Our work really began in earnest before the holiday break, but last week we had a number of key milestones we wanted to update you on. We provided informational presentation to our senior leadership team, which is all of our principals and department directors, and we provided them the community presentation that is being developed, and also provided them key talking points about each of our projects. We also sent initial communication to more than 150 community organizations, neighborhood associations in the community to let them know that the district is ready to provide informational updates if they have an opportunity. And so we've already heard back from more than 10 of those. We've confirmed presentations beginning early February. We're beginning to schedule those presentations now. We've also finalized the design of the informational brochure. This week, we will launch the Proposition S website and promote the web URL to the public, and we will include the informational video that highlights all of our projects. It's about a 5-minute video. It features our community task force on facilities members, and it provides details on each of the projects that will be up for consideration. Our senior leadership team has also been asked to provide us with 2 dates for presentations for their staff, and then identify potential parent liaisons in their schools that can help us share information with others in the community. And they will provide that information to us by the end of the week. Next week, the 23rd, we will share our safety and security video that provides details of how all schools will receive upgrades if voters approve this. We will distribute the informational brochures that I mentioned to you to all of our school sites. We will have those on hand for distribution. We will conduct an SPS presentation, Proposition S presentation at SPS University on the 26th at Hillcrest. And then our senior leadership team members by the end of that week will provide optional dates for PTA community presentations. So what we're doing is when we confirm a presentation within each of our school buildings, so their staff, and then for their PTA and their community, we pair one of our executive leadership team members with the principal to co-present to make sure that we're reaching both the public and the staff with the information. The week of the 30th, we will begin sharing individual project videos. So we'll start with Read Academy. We'll share it that week on social media, on the website, in our e-newsletter. We will conduct a thought exchange to ask the community what additional questions they may have, what information they might need, and we will update our frequently asked questions document accordingly. We also will have business cards, small info that we can leave behind with individuals so that if they have more information, they know where to get their questions answered. The following week, just as we release the video, we'll release the Pipkin video. We'll email parents about important dates that will include the deadline to register to vote, absentee voting dates, and election day. We will increase the frequency of community presentations. We will engage with our parent liaisons that were provided by our senior leadership team, and we'll provide them with an informational toolkit to engage with their community. And then we'll also look for ways to engage our high school students. The weeks of February 13th and February 20th, we will share the Pershing School video the week of the 13th, and then we will provide the Storm Shelter Gymnasium project video the week of the 20th. So again, we'll be continuing to share the information on each of the projects. The week of the 27th, we will begin hosting site tours for the community. So for all of the projects that are up for consideration, we'll make sure we have an opportunity for the community to come inside of the building, to tour the building, to ask questions of the principal, and learn more about the needs. And we will conduct a thought exchange following those tours to answer questions. We'll continue the site tours the week of March 6th. We'll also conduct a product exchange on after those tours, and then we will be sending site-specific emails to the parents at schools with a direct impact. So each of the major school renovation or reconstruction projects, all of the 6 elementary schools will receive specific emails that highlight what will be up for consideration. And then finally, we'll remind our senior leadership team about Vote Today signs that will be made available at their location. Spring break is March 10th through the 17th. We'll be finalizing our Sign for Vote Today signs, and then we'll be delivering flyers to each of the sites with a project overview that will be sent to the students for the 24th. The week of March 27th, we'll be doing a direct mail piece, has information on all the projects, sending emails with key message reminders. Details will be posted on our school message board, so you see signage. Just remind individuals of Election Day. And then we will continue to post on social media, and we'll be delivering Vote Today signs to our sites. April 3rd is the home stretch, so we'll send reminders to vote to staff and parents. We'll host a Facebook Live discussion with our task force co-chairs. We did that in 2019. It was very well received. It gives us one last opportunity to highlight the projects and the process that led us to this point. And then we will be following up post-election with communication. As a reminder, these are the materials that the communication department is providing. We've developed a PowerPoint presentation with key message talking points. There'll be the information brochure, informational videos, one for each project and one overall 5-minute video, an FAQ document, flyers customized for each of our theater patterns, social media graphics, and the Prop S webpage, which we've included the URL throughout the presentation. So that is a brief update. I know there's a lot of information. Any questions that I can answer? Yes, ma'am.
When you say read and encouraging project videos, what does that mean? Does it show the current building?
It does, yes. So the video that will come out this week, that we'll be sending out through email, posting on social media and the website, is a 5-minute video that has an overview of all the Prop-S projects.
I meant like the Read Academy, the Pick-In, and the
Yes.
Pershing. Like what?
So those are mini videos. So what we do is we start with the umbrella video. This 5 minutes has all the projects. And then we produce smaller videos that go a little bit deeper on each one of those projects. So the video will go in, you'll be introduced to the principal, you'll be introduced to a community task force member. It gives you some what we call B-roll footage of the building, so you kind of see as we describe what the current needs are, you actually get to go inside. And that's based on feedback we had from the community in 2019, that not everyone gets to go inside and see for themselves.
It's not going to have visible building.
No.
That's not going to be there.
It really mostly shows, here is the current state of the facility, here are the current needs, and then we forecast what could be achieved if voters approve.
We don't know what's.
That's correct.
I just want, okay, so.
Yes.
So
It's really talking about the current.
It's informational in terms of what it is now.
That's correct.
And then, and so all of this material, direct mail, all this, it's all going to be informational.
Correct. Yes. Informational only.
Because we're using district funds, you know, to set up a webpage, to do the mailers, to
That's
communicate,
right.
so.
And on everything, we always disclose that what is being paid for by the school district, there is a disclaimer line that has to be included on everything we produce that says paid for by the school district of Springfield R12. And that disclaimer language will be on everything that the district produces.
Okay, and for that reason, we're careful to make sure it's always informational.
Always, yeah, we always disclose when it's district produced. That's correct, and all of it will be information only that comes from the school district. Questions?
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we appreciate all your hard work for getting started here. A very clear plan. Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Board comments. We're now ready to hear reports and comments. Oh, no, I'm sorry, superintendent update. Dr. Lathan, do you have any updates?
Just thank you to our staff and our students, especially our student athletes for participating in the march on yesterday in the program to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. Our Read Academy choir did an outstanding job participating on the program. Thank you again to everyone that participated in the 38th Annual Bass Pro Tournament of Champions. As Travis already stated, next Thursday, 4:30 p.m., ribbon cutting at Hillcrest, and then Parent University, SPS University, starting at 5:30 p.m. Please join us. We are giving away a scholarship that will go into a savings account for a student. So please come out and join us next week. Thank you.
Great, now we're to 14.01 board comments. We're ready here. Any reports or comments from board members? Anyone have anything to report? Well, we had great board participation at least one night or a couple nights. The TUC, I think we all enjoyed that. Anyone have anything they want to report or comment? It's a great event. The Tournament of Champions. That was, yeah, we got to say, yeah, we got to say it to Josh. So, okay. Good. I see a pencil. Okay. All right, upcoming meetings, for board meetings, January 24th, board special meeting, which is personnel. Yes, that's just a special meeting for the board. February 14th is our board study session. February 28th, board regular meeting. So we'll get back on track with our special study sessions and regular meeting. That's all I have to report. And please try to the board. I think you will enjoy, if you haven't been to one of our SPS universities so far, try to attend the one at Hillcrest. So any other upcoming meetings anyone wants to. Good. All right, we're moving on to 15.01 plus Delta. This is an opportunity to record anything that really worked for you or anything you'd like to see an improvement. Write them down on a Post-it note to Tammy. Executive session. So the board does need to meet in executive session this evening. I need to read this. Our recommended action is that the board meet in executive session to discuss real estate, legal, and personnel matters as provided in section 610.021, 1, 2, 3, and 13 RSMO. I have a motion. Thank you, Danielle. Do I have a second? Second. Thank you, Sharita. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, let's vote.